And hey, I'm back. Yes, folks, it is Brian and Casey. You know, the guy who started this podcast. Here to talk about the Bundesliga as a whole, mostly because, hey, when you happen to have full work life, and then you got kid, and then you got more on the way, or more just kind of stuff happening, sometimes it could be hard to be the lead host for these episodes. So I'm taking over just for this week's podcast, just the Bundesliga-centered content. And yes, there's Eintracht Dortmund to be excited about. But that there's like another 16 teams that are in this league, Chris. I'm excited to see what happens from the most recent promoted two. I'm excited to see what other teams are able to do because at this moment in time, Chris, Heidenheim is actually participating in their Europa Conference League qualifiers against some Swedish team called Häcken, who I know nothing about. I can't know everything about everything, folks. My brain can only work so hard. But hey, you know what? We're through 45 minutes of football between those two in their first leg, and it's already 1-1. So I'm hoping that Heidenheim qualifies. Chris.
I'm not watching that live. I should turn it on, but I'm looking at the stats. Häcken has 10 shots to 3 for Heidenheim in the first half. So the 1-1 is probably good result for them at this point. They have had very little possession. Heidenheim, for me, as we preview the league, is one that's going to really have to fight. They didn't do a lot of improving, and they lost some attacking players. But now they have to add Conference League play into their schedule. It's going to be a really difficult run for them. I think it's just one of those hold on to the handrails and be along for the ride.
I totally agree on that, Chris, because Heidenheim, look, they were the surprise team that, ended up in 8th place. You would have thought that an Augsburg or, Werder Bremen last season would have been the ones to pip for that final European competition slot. And instead, it was definitely not them. I mean, you had to go through it. You had 5 teams qualifying for the Champions League. You had 2 qualifying for the Europa League, including Eintracht. You had your Europa Conference League. Then they're going through the same level of qualifying stage as we had when we played Sofia, that Bulgarian team who got the win against us in qualification. This is honestly, for me, as you look at the teams who probably are going to finish in the bottom half, Heidenheim's entire season can really be transformed by progress here or them just totally missing out and not being able to participate in Europe. Kind of how, if you remember, Freiburg did that like 8-9 seasons ago, and they were able to finish in like 10th, the first time that they were like properly mid-table in ages. And weirdly enough, they then rattled off year after year, being mid-table, and then punched into Europe eventually. And coupled with a new stadium, that could it's a question of what happens in over this next week for Heidenheim that kind of defines their future for the Bundesliga this season.
Yeah, every team that goes through that first-time European experience, no matter which competition it is, there's some growing pains involved with it. And I think it's important that, we've been regulars in Europe and struggled with maintaining that composure as you move from one competition into the other. For them, they have to be careful not to let a slide in one competition affect them in the other. We've learned how to balance that a little better than we did a couple of years ago, but those emotional swings still happen. And for a team like Heidenheim that doesn't have a lot, they lost more than they gained in the offseason. They really have to be careful with that.
Speaking of the other teams who qualified for Europe, the teams who did well in Europe, your Leverkusens, your Bayerns. Oh, look, if you're making the semifinals of any of the European competitions, hey, you're doing pretty good to be able to earn your league a 5th spot within the Bundesliga itself. So just anyone who wants to poo-poo it, that kind of points it out right there. But yeah, Chris, let's look down the table to the folks who are just joining us. That is, of course, St. Pauli. It's been, a decade since they were last in the Bundesliga. We're finally getting a Hamburg club for the first time in like 6, 7 seasons, because HEFpod got relegated and neither of the Hamburg clubs returned until now. I look at St. Pauli, and I also look at Holstein Kiel. Each of those teams, to me, you only have so many resources available to you to bring in new players that will allow you to. It's not like the Premier League where you basically are given dump truck full of cash to spend. Like, these clubs are looking out for their financial futures and trying to leverage that into long-term success. Kind of like how Darmstadt basically has spent not a euro on their squad, and yet they transformed their, entire club infrastructure to be one where they could long-term be able to sustain themselves at a much more professional level, which is why they've been in it twice. And here we are. St. Pauli is the cult club. I know everyone has an opinion on them, but I want to see what you honestly believe about this club, because they did have their coach pulled from them before they even got a chance to perform in the Bundesliga. What's the chances they survive?
Now, do you know who their new coach is? Someone we've seen before.
I do not know.
I just found this out in the last 5 minutes. He is the former Belgian Cup winner with a club that knocked us out, Union Saint-Gilloise.
Oh,
yeah.
Lord of mercy. Of course they would. And I think he's German as well. He just had a very, very, very long way of getting back to Germany. His success at Union Saint-Gilloise. Look, they took a bite out of us. They're not exactly a big side in the traditional sense of Belgium. So, he could be a guy who does great things for St. Pauli, but they're also a club who you got to make do with less when you're a promoted side, unless you're a Code, Schalke, HSV. We're not going to see a promoted side literally go out there and splash a whole bunch of money now that they're in the Bundesliga. I think that's just something we're going to see long term. And hey, you know what? Good luck to them, because St. Pauli is a fun club. There's a lot of attention that they'll get. Chris, I have seen St. Pauli jerseys at my local MLS side before in the stadium. I even have a St. Pauli shirt that was gifted to me by a friend. So, we've got
a large St. Pauli contingent here. They played a friendly here at Detroit City a few years ago. Actually, it was the same day that we won that Pokal, and that was a very alcohol-infused day for me. But they're going to struggle. Their whole goal is to get safety and stick around for next year. I've got them in last place, to be honest. They don't have the quality to stick around. They've got one or maybe two guys with international roster experience on them, but it's just, it's kind of one of those things. There's elevator clubs, and then there's clubs that are returning for the first time in the decade, and it's just kind of one of those things. If they can survive somehow this year and then maybe next year build a little bit more, I just think it's too much for them to handle right now with the financial limitations they have.
I think you could say the same thing about Kiel. This club has actually done a lot of transformation. Once being in the second division, having multiple times gotten to the playoffs, and then it just doesn't pan out. They've been able to gradually kind of increase their footing within the German hierarchy of kind of where they kind of their club stature is. It just now is a stadium that has 15,000 fans. It's the first time that they're in the Bundesliga, though when it was in a regionalistic competition, I think they won like a title, like donkeys years ago. But I'm looking at Kiel and thinking to myself, you've got a coach who apparently went through the Hoffenheim you set up. He had Flick, he had Nagelsmann, he had Pellegrino Matarazzo. that he was working with hands-on for multiple years. So the guy's kind of been around a lot of guys who know what they're doing. I think this is enough. You know what? I will go out on a limb. I'll actually say that I think that St. Pauli will finish 17th, and I think that Kiel will finish in 16th. They'll give themselves a chance at survival. I think they are the most situated with continuity. No one's honestly left the club pretty much via transfer in the offseason, unlike another team in the relegation, in my personal opinion, the relegation zone, or will be come the end of the season. I just look at Kiel and think you got the continuity. No one's really left. You don't have a coach who's left, so give them a little bit of a leg up. Sort of how we gave Heidenheim a chance to survive because of strong club continuity as compared to the other promoted side of last season, Darmstadt.
I'm going to give you a comparison with this Kiel team. Union Berlin, the undersized stature, first-time promotion, a small stadium environment, really nothing to lose for these guys. And like you said, the continuity over the last summer here, I think they're set up for survival. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be tough. They're not going to be a top 6 team in year one. But I think they're safely above that 16 cut line. The momentum you carry over, the confidence you play with after a promotion, sometimes it can backfire on you, keeping the group intact, playing a second division roster against a first division league. But in this case, I think they have just enough talent to get over the top. Certainly it's going to be a struggle, though. They'll flirt with that line for most of the year.
Yeah, the other team who I think is relegation fodder is honestly the worst setup team for the season. Honestly, you've had their guts pulled out, and there's no money being spent. There's nothing there. They've been a team that's kind of been mid-table to just surviving relegation, and they've not in I think this will be their 4th consecutive season in the Bundesliga. They've not been able to kind of more establish themselves in the middle of the pack. I look at Bochum and I say to myself that whilst they have a longer standing history than a Kiel or a St. Pauli, they just barely got through the playoffs, and the key guys all left.
Yeah, 100%. They're my other guaranteed, besides St. Pauli, Bochum is my other guaranteed relegation. Just, we've gone over it year after year. Their inability to score goals and their inability to stop the other team from scoring, unless it's us, of course, and we get routed 3-0. But, that's it's just one of those things. Or the 1-1 opener at home. I don't know. They have that knack for being dangerous, but also they're a danger to themselves. And I think this is the year it bites them in the ass.
100%. I look at them, and their relegation survival by the playoff last year was just so you just shook your head and you're just like, how? And each one of those players who was a key part of how it happened is gone. Gone. Free transfer. No transfer fee. Got nothing. And I mean, I have the roster in front of me, and I'm like, I recognize 2 guys. 3 guys I recognize. That ain't good. They're not a team that really will ever catch your headlines, except when they will suddenly beat Bayern at home, which they seem to always do. But the numbers backed up that they just got lucky in the fact that Cologne was as bad as they were and Darmstadt were as bad as they were, because they otherwise.
And you can only play with fire. You can only play with fire so many times before you get burned. And I mean, they've been brutally bad a couple years in this stint in the first division and somehow found an escape route. There's going to be, kind of like last year, there's going to be a lot of teams down there trying to battle out of that position. And I think they're the least suited to win a game when it's most needed. I might even take one of the other lower teams we mentioned, like a St. Pauli, in a must-win matchup, because St. Pauli had must-win matchups at the end of last season. They're conditioned for the must-win matches far more than Balkan has been.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's look at some of the other teams that are participating in the Bundesliga this season, the ones who were carried over from last season. I have a couple teams in here that I'm not sure what to expect from, but it's not going to be good. I just don't think that they're going to. I think they're going to be a bunch of swings and misses. I look at Union Berlin. Maybe they'll surprise folks and be a mid-table team. I think they're going to be kind of circling the drain, but keep themselves at arm's distance for the entire season. I just look at them. I don't think that there's a lot going on there. I look at Borussia Mönchengladbach as a team that, honestly, they could finish in a European place. But the fact is, I almost wonder if their coach really is just crap. And that the whole time that we were bigging them up for all these years, like, oh, they're a team bound for greatness or whatever. Like, that team, with the fan base that they have, that team is just, God, like, I can't understand how. Like, it's one thing if it's Wolfsburg who's pissing away money down, like, ridiculously down the drain because Volkswagen doesn't know what the hell to do with their lives. And, just a place where nobody wants to go, nobody wants to live. Like, Borussia Mönchengladbach is a team who has expectations of their players, and maybe they'll finally wake up, but I see them as a team who's going to be down in the bottom half. I think Augsburg will be down there too. The guy who was key to them being a middle-of-the-pack team to chasing that European place until the very end. They sold him to Stuttgart for Demirovic, I think was his name, for 20 million euros. I'm sure they'll be fine. They're just a team that we just always want them to get relegated, but they never do. And I will throw in Freiburg in that other team who will be kind of bottom half of the table, won't do a whole lot, mostly because the era of Christian Streich is over. You still got a lot of the pieces there, so they'll be likely mid-table, but still in the bottom 9 of the Bundesliga table.
Yeah, you packed a lot in there, but I think the one word that comes to mind is there's a purgatory within the Bundesliga right now. There's a good number of clubs that are not spending the resources necessary to compete for Europe, but they're also just talented enough to remain above that cut line or the potential cut line at 16. Gladbach is one for me that's been there for a few years now, one that had made runs in Europe and flirted with the upper third of the table, and then all of a sudden disappear for years at a time. Kind of reminds me a bit of us before this modern swing of winning form and European qualification on a regular basis, where the first goal at the start of the season was get safety, get that 34, 35 points, whatever is needed for safety, and then advance from there and see if you can just jump up a slot or two. That's where Gladbach is. Freiburg, it remains to be seen how they're going to handle new manager and the expectations, the way that they develop talent in-house in the last few years and punched probably further above their weight class than any other club in the league. I expect a little bit of a fall from them, but still they should have enough resources to sit right around the middle of the table. I don't know. There's just, outside of the top third and the bottom third, that middle third is just kind of a mess.
I think you're right.
And, Gladbach has Joe Scally, the American back who's getting better and better. I think it's some of those guys that him for them. But there's a couple other players on other sides that are escaping my mind right now where it might take one or two talented players to do some things that were just kind of off the radar for most of the league, to keep them safe. And then, there's always going to be a team in this league like Stuttgart last year who would say, where did they come from? Nobody saw that coming. I don't know who that could be this year. To me, it's pretty clear cut that top 6, 7 teams.
You're not wrong. Because I'd like to say that I did see Stuttgart being a team who was going to be mid-table, if not up, because of the way that once they kind of figured things out, they pulled their asses out of the frying pan and into 16th place. Then they just thrashed Hamburg or two legs, which was, it was like, it was a bully playing with an obviously inferior opponent, like when it came to that. But here's my mid-table guys who could do something. I still am throwing Heidenheim in that mid-table, but with a chance, a very likely mid-table finish, but with a chance of Europe. A lot depends on kind of how they qualify. I think of them as a very steady-headed club who will, they thrive off of making smart decisions. They'll add maybe one or two more pieces than normal because they have a little bit more cash to spend. I think that they will make a transfer move if they qualify for Europe. I do think that they'll make one or two loan moves with options of purchasing that they will then work with, and I think they're going to be a good team. I think when I say good team, relegation is never a threat with them. Another one who's not going to have a relegation as a threat is Mainz. I know we don't like them, but the sheer fact of how bad they were, when they made the coaching change, they were so chaotically bad, and yet they made the coaching switch. It took a couple matches. They went undefeated in their last 9 matches of the season, winning most of them. They just were a tear, and I look
I'm
at
not
them.
Buying it.
Oh, you're not buying? It's kind of like when they
it
had,
might be. It might be my eagle colored glasses, but I've got mines in the relegation playoff spot. Every team has that. We did it with Niko Kovac coming in. That mid to late season manager replacement gives you a little bump, saves you from a bad spot. It happens frequently.
Nice is able to dig up coaches who do that. Bo Svensson did it before, and now there's Hendricks.
Yeah, but what happens the next year?
I think
a lot of times they struggle
the
to
very
carry.
next season, and it was the season afterwards that they didn't. It was down to management not investing into the squad, or, hey, maybe they're just not getting a transfer that's able to allow them to invest in it. I still think mine's will be kind of mid-table safety. Bremen and Hoffenheim, I think, are going to be in that same sort of category. I look at Bremen, and I'm not really all too worried. They, in terms of, big transfers out and such, honestly, there's not been a lot of turnover at Bremen, and I look at that as a good thing. And, Werder Bremen is one of the traditional teams, but I look at them and I think to myself, hey, you know what? You make just a couple moves. This Alvaro, one of my buddies, is very excited about this Skelly Alvaro, who apparently is going to be a great central midfielder for Bremen. They splashed 5 million euros for him. It's not something that they usually will spend. They're not a very big spending club, but the continuity is kind of there, and I think that I don't think they're gonna perhaps qualify for Europe. I think our view of the top 6 is the top 6 unless someone really punches above their weight, which I think Hoffenheim is with Matarazzo. He had that kind of going up and down. When they were good, they were really good. And I think that Hoffenheim will kind of be in that 7 to 9 kind of slot category. That they don't have enough firepower to kind of punch above that, but it is enough to be right there in European qualification until the very end.
Yeah, they've been improving. Bremen, that is, has been improving since their promotion a few years ago. And I thought 9 was appropriate last year. They weren't great. They weren't terrible. They were just kind of mid-table, which defines that ninth position. But you talked about the stability there. I think that's a good thing for them because if anything, you're not falling back. They were still pretty balanced in age and just a couple small improvements and having the comfort of having a third-year manager who knows his system. I think they'll be in a position to fight for Europe. I don't think they're going to get it, like you said, but they'll fight for it. They'll be in a better position to hold off some of the other contenders if need be.
Gotcha. Well, let's look to the European teams, and obviously Eintracht did qualify for that, but this is talking about where the rest of the league is. Let's go from 5th place up. So Borussia Dortmund, they made the switch to go with Nuri Sahin as their new head coach, coming off the Champions League finalist appearance. I'm looking at this team, and I know they're going to be in that top 6 sort of finish. I'm not sure where just yet. I'm not sure what sort of team he'll bring in, but they've spent a fair bit of money buying 2 of the key guys from the Stuttgart team that finished in 2nd. In Anton and Garassi, they bought Bayer. Somehow, some way, they made money off of selling Füllkrug. Like, they bought him for 10 million from Bremen, and then earned 27 in selling him for a guy who's 31. That's just that was kind of hilarious. You lose Michael Royce, but he was already a diminishing return player. I look at them and think to myself, this is a team who you know they're going to be a top-end finisher. They're not a team, in my opinion, who's going to be challenging for the title unless the stars align. I think this is a team who's kind of more looking at, we want to build a team to compete now rather than, we'll compete, but we're also getting these bona fide superstars of the future, their chance to shine, and we'll see what happens. I look at them as a top 6 team, and not much more to say on.
I have a question for you. Question for you on them. Do you think that going to a Champions League final last year, even though they lost, do you think that gives them a leg up as far as knowing how to make runs? Not that you're Dortmund, you're always deep in competitions, but going to a final kind of gives you an edge and says, I had a taste of it, now I want more. And then, they've struggled to be in that top 2 in the league the last few years. Is this the one that kind of separates them, having that edge, that chip on the shoulder from what happened in June? I don't know. I've got them sitting at 3. I think there's going to be a little more fight, a little more hunger after coming up that close to the biggest club championship in Europe.
Right. I think that they're looking at 4th place, maybe 3rd. It kind of depends on how the people above them kind of finish. So let's talk about the one who was just 1 slot above. That is a fizzy drink. They honestly, that's a team who's got continuity there. They sold off that wacko Angelino and Danny Olmo, who I don't get how they got $55 million for him, for a guy who was crocked for half of the season last year. And honestly, he only played in 1 out of every 2 games, and yet they're selling him for just a massive fee. It's just absolutely impressive, the kind of move, sell on that they did there. Supposedly, this Odrago from Schalke is the next big German, project. He's going to be something for the future. And this new set that they picked up is also going to be is stupid fast and is on the wing. I look at Leipzig, and they're not going to challenge. When I say challenge for the title, I don't think that they're going to finish any further than second, because I think the team that I have in first is just going to be that much better than everyone else. I think Leipzig will improve on their overall performance, which means, God, we're probably going to face them in like the semifinals of the Pokal or something. Or they'll even make like a run to like the semifinals of the Champions League. I think that's a team that their players are all due for that, like finally poking through into the upper echelons of just Europe and the Bundesliga in general, that they haven't been at since their first season in the Bundesliga when they freaking shocked everybody. I don't like talking about them, but damn it.
There's nothing shocking about them anymore, but you have to be aware of where they are, because they're savvy business-wise, and they've made some quality moves this year with some younger players. Almo, is gone, but certainly they've filled in that spot. Try to get them early if you're going to beat them, because I think they're going to get better as the year goes on and the younger guys get better. I got them finishing fourth. I think they might have a slow start because of that, but then they probably recover after January. Fourth for Leipzig, third for Dortmund in my mind.
I look at the team who finished in third last season. The team who typically, let's be real, they're typically the one who just kind of waltzes right over everybody. It is Bayern, their first non-title winning season in a very, very long time. And look, they've spent a fair bit. They've all 100-something million. They got a new coach who, he's more of an idealist, which is why he got relegated from his Premier League side last season. He plays in a style, and I don't think that they are ready for that. I look at this Bayern team, and there's a lot of stuff that they want to do more transfer work, but they don't have enough that has gone out to allow them to make that all happen. I mean, they've sold 2 guys to England, and that's kind of it. I look at them and I think, you're trying to make a huge makeover, and you got most of your pillars still in there who are going to keep you where you are. They're not going to be German champions for a second year running.
No.
I am predicting that. Well, I predicted last year, I think, that Leipzig would win the title, because I was an idiot. I'm again predicting Bayern not to win the title. Only, I think everyone knows who I'm picking them to win the title. So, yeah, Bayern, I don't think they'll finish below fourth. They'll finish in the Champions League places. I think that there's just too much talent there and everything. I just look at them and I'm like, you got a lot of work to make up, and maybe you'll have a run in the Pokal or the Champions League again. We'll see, but that's the only chances at silverware this season.
Yeah, I bragged enough about the fact that I picked Leverkusen to win the title last year instead of Bayern, and this is the last day I can formally acknowledge that victory. Got to move on to this season. But I agree with you, Bayern Munich will not return to the top. But I don't think their slide is going to be dramatic. They're still going to be in contention because they still have the top scorer in the Bundesliga right now with Harry Kane.
But he's not healthy yet. If they don't want to hit the ground running, they
But you go a month without Harry Kane, he's still going to be at the 25 goal mark by the end of the year. He's a good player. Now, frankly, I don't know how long he's going to be out. Do you?
He's getting back to fitness. I don't think we'll honestly see him firing until September. Fully back and rearing to go. I don't think it's going to be until September for him.
I mean, looking at their early season matchups, they open with Wolfsburg, Freiburg, Kiel, Bremen, and Leverkusen. So if they could get him back by Leverkusen September 28th, that's a pretty good period to work him into fitness. Maybe a couple spot appearances in the weeks leading up to it. But there's no reason they can't start the season with 4 victories before that Leverkusen match, which is why I just can't write him off yet. I mean, they're Bayern. Their payroll is higher than like the bottom four clubs combined, so, at least. So we got to respect the talent that's there. And, they did their typical Bayern thing of buy some of the players from other teams that, are in the league, and we're going to have to deal with them being near the top, but I'm with you. They're not going to win it.
Yeah, let's talk. Oh, okay. Valby Stuttgart, I'll briefly kind of comment on them. I think the guts, the main core got ripped out. The continuity that they have is there's a fair number of guys that are still left, but you had like a great number of players. A lot of money's been made. They've made some big transfers. I don't think that pizzazz of the last couple of seasons will be there, but I do foresee them being a Europa League qualifying team. I think that the worst case scenario for Eintracht Frankfurt is if Stuttgart qualifies for the Champions League again. This is a club who, from a financial structure, could become a huge thorn in everybody's side long term if you allow that city, who's got a lot of auto money behind it, if you allow them to be at the big kid table, they're going to eat and eat and eat because cars guzzle and guzzle money. So,
yeah, I do think that Stuttgart is set up to be a top European, not a top European, a top Bundesliga side for a few years. But I think they're actually going to have a step back this year, managing a lot more on the calendar and more expectations, all those things. I don't think they're quite ready for that this year. But after losing some key performers, like you said, a couple signings, a loan to secured signing, what's his name? Undava, I think. He's the kind of guy that you can rely on. And I think 20 goals or somewhere around there in all competitions last year. So Stuttgart will take a step back, but they'll be back in Europe next year. And I think they'll kind of take that position of, regular European participant for a few years.
Yeah, I just look at Stuttgart and I'm thinking to myself, Demirovic and Undav. I mean, Undav was a part of the team last season. They forked over a lot of money for him, and Demirovic from Augsburg. I just look at those two guys right up top as that's a lot of money to wrap up in that when you had other kind of exits within your team. Ito, who I had always thought would be a great addition to the Eintracht. Well, we sure as shit didn't get that. Anton went to, so you had your two center back pairing go away to Bayern and Dortmund. I just don't think that you're able to replicate anything like that just yet, and we'll see about that we'll see what the future kind of holds there. Let's talk about Leverkusen, the team who won the title, and honestly, the team who's going to win the title again. Chris, you were right. I was wrong. You picked one plastic club. You picked one plastic club to win the title. You picked the right one. I picked another plastic club to win the title. I did not win. They did finish top four, but Bayer Leverkusen is a team that they've added some pieces. They basically brought the band back. There's no one who's leaving who was a bona fide first 11 guy. They're going to qualify for the Champions League. They're then going to do extremely well in the Champions League. I don't know how far they can go within it, but they are going to win the Bundesliga again. It ain't going to be Eintracht unless a miracle happens. It ain't going to be Eintracht, but we can aspire to higher places. So, in a nutshell,
as much as I predicted that Leverkusen win last year, their double was expected and well earned. I think it's disappointing they didn't win the triple. They got throttled by Atalanta in that European final. To go 51 matches undefeated is remarkable, record-breaking. But then to lose it in a Europa Cup final, I mean, I'm just saying, if that was Eintracht Frankfurt, we never would have lost that European final. We don't do that here in Frankfurt. So maybe if we want to take that position this year and run off 51 in a row, I'd be totally fine with that.
That's a lot, man. That is a lot to ask of any team.
But yes, they are going to repeat. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Yeah, I'm looking at Leverkusen, and I'm just kind of looking at their fixtures that they got coming up. They got the local derby against Gladbach. Gladbach has got to say that it is this year because they obviously failed. Then they got Leipzig for match day 2. So, and you mentioned match day 5 that they got Bayern. Before that, they got Hoffenheim and Wolfsburg. By the time that they faced Eintracht in match day, what is that? 7? As we come back from the October international break. In theory, they could be unblemished again and have dispatched with 2 of the anywhere close to challengers available to them. And at that point,
it's really hard.
Yeah.
I mean, there have been sides with far more talent than them in recent and ancient history, far more talented sides that went nowhere near perfect the way that they did. That sustained level of play is not likely just because it's difficult, but then they played 53 matches last year. I mean, that takes a toll when you go to the final in every competition you play and win a title. Now, fortunately, they had the title wrapped up, but they were still playing for perfection, and they played most of their A-list players right until the very end. That's going to wear on them. They're not going to be perfect. Every team is just naturally prone to lose one here or there, and but they're still, beyond anyone else. Xhaka might have been the most fun player to watch in Germany last year. I hate to say it, Brian, but I enjoy watching this team play.
You know what? It's okay when you see a team that is exciting, creative, makes you enjoy watching 90 minutes of football. And Leverkusen, as much as we don't like who they are represented by in terms of a club structure, with what you saw on the pitch, you can enjoy stuff that is drab. That a boring match can still be something that you can enjoy. But when you have a team that's able to perform the way that they did, it's very easy on the eye. So that wraps us up this segment of the podcast where we're talking about the Bundesliga. Everyone has their own Bundesliga opinions, and we'll predict where the Eintracht will fall. I think we're bound for another 5th place season, but who knows? Maybe if we do well in Europe and everyone else pulls their weight for once, or twice as the case was last season, perhaps 5th place is all that we need to finish in Champions League, and then we can get a piece of that very, very sweet and rich cake that is called the Champions League. So that's it for this segment covering the Bundesliga. That is a lot to ask of any team.
Hey, Eintracht Frankfurt, sha-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. Hey, Eintracht Frankfurt, sha-la-la-la-la-la-la.